we're excited to have Altitude as a sponsor of the show. There's so many more things that we're going to be sharing with Altitude in the coming weeks, but thank you for the belief in this. We're excited to build a really, really amazing place on the internet where people can learn about modern money and the human beings, the people behind some of these headlines. And you guys have been doing a ton of stuff. Maybe we start with just the quick background on this kind of really interesting squads altitude dynamic. And maybe we start with a little bit of positioning into how you came into this product to begin with. And I know there's some news that will, like some product features that we'll cover too.
Yeah, for sure. So we actually started by focusing on very crypto-native use cases. We built the biggest multisig and programmable wallet infrastructure for Solana. We have the product Squads Multisig today secure about $10 billion in value, depending on sort of crypto prices, about $2 billion in stables. And we serve a lot of kind of the largest protocols and crypto institutions, helping them secure and manage digital assets together. That's been really our journey for the last couple of years. I would say somewhere along the way, we also discovered that a lot of our customers were already using stablecoins essentially as the default way to manage their corporate treasury, right? And so that's how we were a little, I guess, earlier than others, right, to the stablecoin, to actually forming a stablecoin thesis, right? Because we saw our customers embrace stablecoins much sooner than I would say the broader market. Also, we never actually had a bank account at Squad, so we always use stablecoins as the default way for us to, run our company, and that always also helped, right? And so Altitude was sort of this natural extension of multisig, where the way we think about it today is like we started from a very crypto-native place, where, like we built the Squads protocol, right? Like it was we pioneered a lot of things on the security side on Solana and did the first formal verified program and did a lot of complicated infrastructure development in the early days. Then we built a bunch of APIs that abstract away the complexity of the protocol, but still are very developer kind of centric. Then we built Squads Multisig, which is accessible to obviously humans and institutions, but it was still, you have to know what you're doing, right? Like you have to have, you need to understand how to work with, on-chain primitives. You usually come to multisig because you want to interact with DeFi or you want to do more complex on-chain kind of workflows. And then Altitude is the furthest form of abstraction, right? Like it allows you to essentially run your entire financial operations as a business purely on stablecoin rails without really kind of thinking about the underlying architecture, right? So it feels like it's a normal business bank account with, and we're going to talk more about sort of the features we're launching, but the idea is that, it's kind of like three major layers to the product. There's the core, which is, the payments, it's the yield, it's the cards. And so you can hold, earn, and spend. On top of that, you have the workflows, right? So that's, bill pay, accounting, invoicing. And the third layer is the automation layer, the agentic layer, which we'll talk about more, I guess, down the line. But I would say that's roughly how we're thinking about the product. And it's been, to us, it feels very natural, right? Because like we've been essentially helping businesses bank on chain for a long time on multisig, and Altitude is just a much more streamlined way for our customers to do that.
How have you seen those needs shift from your customers? Because I imagine there was probably some even at multisig directly some friction points when you're working with maybe certain vendors that maybe aren't stablecoin native. We've heard from other guests that stablecoins are great on the on-chain rails. The developer tooling's there. Fiat's the problem. Would you say that's been a similar experience going to the Altitude route? I mean, even launching bill pay recently, or talk to me about what that experience has been like.
So we've been doing this for a while. So we just started year 5 of the company history. And so we actually have seen Circle back in like at the end of 2021 do third-party payouts, right? So I could pay somebody else from my Circle account, right? I could do stablecoin to fiat essentially from Circle. At some point, Circle sunsetted that feature, and for a while, they put a cap essentially on our capabilities to build an actual, financial account for the world on top of this infrastructure. And then actually, we met Bridge pretty early days, sort of before the Stripe acquisition, and they were one of the first companies to start doing that again, right? And for us, that unlocked the capabilities of being able to hold your stablecoin treasury in a self-custodial account and then be able to do a payout to somebody else's bank account, pay a vendor or an employee or a contractor. And so that was really like the big unlock in the early days. Since then, obviously the orchestration ecosystem is booming. There's a lot of different options. There's, kind of local rail providers. There's, providers that just do Swift. There's providers that do, US, Europe, whatever it is, right? And so right now I would say like we feel like we're with this new age of like the PSP ecosystem exploding, right? Because you essentially have like stablecoin based PSPs starting to like, pop up in different places. And it feels great to be, I guess, in our position because we get to have, because once you decouple the bank account from the actual place where you hold your stablecoins, right? So in our case, you hold everything in a self-custodial wallet. The banks are actually used just for money transmission, right? They're essentially used for settling payments. And so from that perspective, you can have a stablecoin balance that gets connected to 10, 20, 30 local rail providers that allow us to get the best price, allow us to settle at local rail fees and speeds, as opposed to using Swift and kind of systems that are take longer and actually are much more costly. So I would say from that perspective, it's a great time to build in the stablecoin space, right? There's a lot of different players, and so we get to work with different providers and figure out what makes the most sense for us from a DevX perspective, from a cost perspective, from a performance perspective.
Question for you, Stepan. So, you mentioned Bridge. Bridge was, you picked the right horse, I guess, as they say, in terms of who you chose to build with, and incredible story and what's continuing to unfold with that business. I'm curious for you when you think about Altitude right now, as you're building this business banking the stablecoin powered business banking product, and specifically, I'm curious around what pieces of that you need to really build with companies like Bridge, versus maybe things that you have had to really build natively and architect completely custom on your end. And maybe bill pay or things like that fall into this, or very like product focused things. Like, what are the differences there that you've experienced of like, hey, maybe we can use this provider, this infrastructure for this, but over here we have very clear like custom build needs. Like, what are some of the differences there, and what have you experienced so far as you guys build the platform? We use Altitude, just to throw this out there too. It's been really fun to get to know that platform in recent months and begin to see it continue to get better over time, just like our stream. We're going to be continuing we're both building products that get better over time. So what are some of those things that you see?
I would say we see one of our biggest advantages is that we own a lot of the stack, right? And if you think about like app down, we own everything. I guess other than the chain, like we're built on Solana, but then above the chain and between sort of, we own the protocol layer, we own the API layer, we own the product layer itself, right? So it's really important for us to own that part of the stack vertically because, for example, if you want to do an agentic workflow where you have an agent automate certain transactions for you because you want those transactions to be recurring, you want to actually make the necessary protocol changes, you want this to be abstracted on the API layer, and then implemented in the product in a way that the customer actually wants to interact with. And so being able not to rely on third parties for that part of the stack is highly important. I think everything above the app, so we're talking like the regulatory piece, right, should be, we've been thinking about this a lot in terms of how do we kind of work with different partners to get max coverage, right? But in a way where it's redundant, in a way that is secure, and we're able to guarantee to our customers that their payments are going to land, they're going to land on time, and that's actually going to happen. And so I would say from that perspective, right now there's corridors that work great where we feel really comfortable working with partners. There's corridors where we still, we would love to have better partners. I would say today we feel like our edge is definitely not in getting licenses and working with banks. It's actually continuing to advance the part that nobody is really going that deep on, right? Like there's one thing we're working on that is not really developed at all, is like how can you do ACH pool that actually pulls from a stablecoin balance, right? Like right now there's a big need for, if you're a company running on stablecoins in the US, you actually want to do payroll, you want to do kind of payroll is probably the biggest use case, right? Like you want to connect to Deal, to Gusto. ACH pool is like the biggest use case, but how should that work, right? If you're actually managing your treasuries for stablecoins. So it's an example of a problem. Like the bill pay is another one, right? Like how can you do bill pay that pulls from a stablecoin balance that allows you to kind of move at the stablecoin speed, but at a very different connecting essentially the two architectures, right? How can you do accounting? How can you do invoicing on top of that infrastructure? And so we're much more excited about solving those problems and then improving the protocol to serve those use cases, right? Than actually going out there and trying to compete with, I guess, the sort of the orchestration ecosystem or kind of any other ecosystem that exists on top of the app, in our case, in the stack.
I
And
have
so
two
when
quick
you,
follow-up
oh, go
questions,
ahead.
and then Zach, feel free. One, what are some of those corridors? I think just for the people listening who might be building in that area, would be curious to just have all those salespeople start hitting you guys up. What are the corridors that you are looking into, and specifically, what makes that ACH pull so difficult? Those are just two of the follow-ups I had.
I would say from a corridor perspective, like Swift is still like doing Swift reliably is still great. Like we have a couple of partners that we really enjoy working with, and we think we're going to have a great experience. But still, if you're building an orchestration platform, solving Swift in a way that allows us as a customer to understand where the payment actually is and when it's going to land is super useful, and so would love to see that. I would say we're seeing a lot of demand for Singapore dollars and doing kind of local payouts in Singapore, dirham in UAE, where I'm at right now, also very viable and kind of having more options there. I would say those probably are the two most burning ones. US, Europe, and UK are pretty well covered. I would say across kind of all the major players. But going outside of that, and obviously Latin America in some regions is covered really well. There's others that I think still being worked on. I think on the ACH pool is just the complexity is you kind of have to the end state is like settled in fiat, right? Because that's where your like Deal or Gusto, whatever payroll platform of choice or Rippling, right? They will be using fiat to essentially pull the payment. So you need to settle with fiat, but the original balance is in stablecoins. So it's just you need to create a system where you can mirror, right? Essentially the stablecoin balance and the fiat balance, and somebody in the middle, right? That's kind of how stablecoin-backed cards actually work, right? Majority of them, where there's a fiat balance that gets settled, and then there's some settlement that happens on chain, right, through stablecoins. That needs to be replicated, but still there isn't much. We haven't seen that actually done by any of the providers, and maybe one of the reasons is because like nobody has gone, I guess, that far in figuring out, okay, because one of our core tenets with Altitude is like we want to do everything through stablecoins, right? And for us,
Yeah.
every workflow matters, and we're trying to go like that's why the Altitude focus is so important for the company, is because we're really narrowing our focus of solving the essentially business outcomes for companies that want to run on stablecoins, or we expect a lot more of them to kind of transition to that world. We want to go as far as possible to make sure that we have thought of every single kind of use case and workflow to be able to cover through the platform.
So we've seen recently Gusto come back out with enabling payouts, to contractors and stablecoins. And you mentioned having to do ACH pools. Do you see us going towards a world with some of these payroll platforms where they will be doing recurring transactions in stablecoins, and that full flow and Endeavor has to touch dollars? Or do you think right now we're just in a world where it may go stable coins to fiat, back out to stable coins, depending on the contractor?
I think that actually depends on the regulatory posture of a specific company. Like there's a lot of different limitations that they face. So because there's like a lot of legacy infrastructure they need to maintain, they have a lot of licenses and kind of partnerships they need to honor, right? And stablecoins are a big unlock for them, but they still have to kind of maintain all the legacy things. I would say we're definitely going to see kind of in the middle, you're going to see stablecoin settlement happen. At the end of the day, the biggest question is more about the last mile, right? Like if I'm a contractor and I receive a stablecoin payment, I want to either spend it directly, and right, like I think that's a big opportunity for all these payout platforms where they can become the neobank of choice for those contractors. They're already getting paid through that platform. Why not just stay there, right? They can offer them a card, they can offer them yield. But I would say right now it's still early days, right? Like right now it's really about can you receive your payment in stable coins. We'll see where this goes. I would love to see a new platform appear that just goes stablecoin first from day one, right? And say, we're going to just embrace this reality. It's a great opportunity to also like bootstrap, a neobank business as well. Because, payroll is all about, or like payouts are all about compliance and solving a bunch of these regulatory things. That could be your way into, I guess I'm encouraging on this live stream, for builders to go and kind of build new platforms that are also global from day one, right? Like I think Deal did an amazing job and in terms of like building a platform that is global, right? And they're really focused on contractors, but I would say Gusto and Rippling are still very, US-centric. Same goes for a lot of the like business banking solutions overall, right? Like they're all very focused on specific geos.
Interesting. I wanted to switch gears a little bit, going back to Altitude. I'm reading your tweet right now and it says no more patchwork, one account. I mean, who right now would you say that you're building Altitude for? I know, and it's actually used to work at a crypto fiat payroll company, Rise. And going into that role, this was 2 or 3 years ago. I thought this was going to be very crypto native. I'd only be working with on-chain orgs. And, month after month, I slowly started to see this shift. I'm curious who in your mind right now, who is Altitude for? Who should people put as more on the side of a crypto neobanking solution? Is this an international neobanking solution? Is it a category of one right now? How do you think about Altitude?
So we really like to think of Altitude as the ultimate business account for businesses on the frontier, right? And the frontier can mean multiple things. I would say if you are pioneering new technology, if you're building the new technology, whether it's crypto, whether it's AI, quantum, biotech, defense, we already assume that you're biased towards efficiency, you're biased towards new technologies that help you save time and money. We definitely are excited about those kind of customers, right? And then if you're an established business, if you're a Fortune 500 that is adopting stablecoins because you want to introduce much more efficiency to how you move money, right, across your company group, for example, we also think that you're on the frontier, right? So I would say that's like a very broad way to think about the ICP. To make it more specific, like when we work with crypto companies, for example, right, the patchwork quote that you said, right, it's really about as a crypto company today, you probably have a lot of different accounts. You have one for spend management and expenses. You have one for like your core banking and like operating account. You maybe most likely have one on-chain to hold the on-chain treasury. And then maybe even have one more for the workflows. And so we really, with Altitude, combine it all into a single place. So you don't need to worry about managing 4 different things, and you can manage just one, right? And so that is probably the biggest unlock for crypto teams specifically. From other types of customers, we're seeing a lot of demand for obviously settling transactions, much cheaper when they need to do cross-border transfers, right? So if you have global workforce, you have global contractors, you have suppliers that you need to pay. Usually, I would say still, we're seeing majority of the inflow of customers that recognize that on one side of the payment, they actually need stablecoins, right? So either their supplier is requiring to accept the payment in stables, or they want to pay somebody in stables, right? And so that is still very much where we are today. And I would say we're gradually expanding the ICP umbrella, right? But right now we feel like we want to do right by the customers that are on platform and kind of grow in a much more steady way, because we have great ambitions in terms of what the product actually needs to look like, right? And as I described, kind of the 3 layers, there's a lot of opportunities to build an incredible product. And so from that perspective, I would say right now we're probably 65 to 70% focused on companies like ourselves, which have been in the crypto space for a while, have been holding some kind of balance sheet in stablecoins for the last couple of years, and gradually expanding to other types of customers.
Has there been anybody that like came inbound that just completely shocked you and like you're like, I would never have thought this company was wanting to use stablecoins?
I would say it's just like a lot of merchants that are selling all kinds of physical goods that for one reason or the other, right? There's a payment that they need to make in stablecoins, or they need to accept a payment in stablecoins. And then seeing some of them stay to earn yield on the capital, or just actually retain assets on platform and stablecoins has been interesting. But yeah, I would say that's probably the most unexpected, right? Where you have like merchants selling like leather goods in kind of strange regions of Europe and all kinds of things, right? So I'd say those probably are the most interesting. And then there's a lot of kind of like marketing and design agencies just kind of seeing the reach that they have, right? And like the amount of customers they have globally, and I guess also contractors and employees they need to pay. That's also just been interesting for us to evaluate. But I would say we do expect to, as we kind of start branching out more to less stablecoin native businesses, we expect to collect a lot more interesting data in terms of who finds stablecoins valuable and actually wants to use them.
It's interesting how it's, adopting some of these platforms is kind of born out of necessity, where you have a vendor that says, I either want stablecoins or I want to accept it, but then you go through it and they're like, oh, this is nice. I think I'm going to actually, they slowly start to shift. And it's really that notion that, it's not until you use it, it's not until you kind of do that first stablecoin transfer that your wheels start to turn a little bit.
Yeah, and it's also our job to actually, make it feel great, right? And I think from a UX perspective, I think the payments, the act of payments for stablecoins is already, it's instant. It feels great. I would say a lot of our the work we're doing right now is around how can you make self-custody feel custodial, right? How can you make self-custody feel not just secure, but from a UX perspective, indistinguishable from using a traditional bank account in all the good ways, not all the bad ways. And so I would say, because that's also like a very core tenet of how we think about really scaling stablecoins to a lot of businesses globally, is self-custody is just, it's a massive unlock, right? It allows us to go global from day one and then, selectively figure out where we want to be connected to fiat rails, right? And facilitate that connectivity. And so it's just, we also think that, again, talking about what we discussed before, right? Like owning the stack from app down allows us to innovate in a way that, I guess, traditional players that are adopting stablecoins just can't, because the way, they would probably scale their business would still be, through finding local banking partners and local PSPs to work with. In our case, we're actually able to, innovate on the self-custodial element of the business and onboard a lot more customers much quicker.
Awesome. A lot to unpack, I'm sure, in the coming months. I'm just seeing OCR AI. I imagine AI is going to be a recurring topic that I'm sure we'd love to have you back on the stream to dive into.
I'm pumped to see how the Altitude product becomes more like natively agentic. It's something that we're just thinking a lot about, and I know that you guys have kind of built it for success in that world. So yeah, man, Stepan, it's great to have you on. It's great to yes, also just meet a lot of the other teammates and people building Altitude with you. The team, everyone that we've met is just so amazing as well. And we've been delighted as we've started using Altitude for our business as well. So we're excited to have you as a sponsor, excited to have more of these conversations. Thanks for taking the time.
Amazing. Thanks for having me. I love the show.
Thanks, Evan. See you later.